500 years before Christ, a young prince set out on a journey. He would travel through pain and suffering to reach nirvana, the everlasting bliss we all dream of.
Symbol of peace, symbol of compassion, symbol of non-violence.
He was the Buddha. He grew up in a palace surrounded by luxury. In his teens, his privilege afforded him every indulgence. But he gave all this up to gain ultimate wisdom. He would travel the darkest corridors of his mind to come face to face with the devil inside him. He founded the first world religion, followed today by over 400 million people. A religion where meditation is used to reach a state of complete peace and happiness.
Our own potential, our own effort to know the ultimate reality.
And the events of his life make up one of the greatest stories ever told, and the Buddha, the world's most enduring icon. Two and a half thousand years after his death, the Buddha's message lives on. The Dalai Lama, the spiritual figurehead of Tibetan Buddhism, passes on the teachings of the Buddha, continuing a practice that began the day he died. Buddhism has been adopted by many different cultures and has many interpretations. The Buddha's teachings of a higher mental calm and clarity are seen by some as a religion, others a philosophy, even a psychotherapy.
Some people describe Buddhism is not a religion, but Buddhism is science of mind.
The Buddha's message is as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago.
What has made Buddhism so popular is that it is insightful and largely true, that the Buddha discovered immensely important things.
Unlike other religions, Buddhism, which centers on the mind, has no supreme God. Instead, a great teacher, the Buddha, or the awakened one.
It seems very almost intuitive to an age in which psychology becomes, for many people, an alternative to religion. It's the means, as a therapeutic means, to deal with the problems of life. And so it seems very accessible to many people.
There are many representations of the Buddha, and Buddhists all have their own picture in their minds of what he was like.
Some kind of vibration of complete peace, non-violence. I think that must be there.
Until little more than 100 years ago, the life of the Buddha remained unknown to the West. By the time the British colonized India, the country of the Buddha's birth, Buddhism had all but died out, destroyed by Hindu kings and Muslim invaders. The origins and the sites of the Buddha's life became lost to everyone. It wasn't until British colonial archaeologists began to explore northern India that their discoveries began to root the Buddha's life in historical fact.
In the 1860s, a series of archaeologists began to try and identify the sites associated with the life of the Buddha. By the 1890s, many of these sites had been successfully identified within the Ganges area. But at that time, two of the great sites connected with Buddhism were still missing. The site of Lumbini, where the Buddha had actually been born, and the site of Kapilavastu, which was the childhood home of the Buddha. The area to the north of the Ganges is less well known, partly because of the very thick jungle there, tigers, as well as malaria.
It took a breakthrough discovery to unlock the story of the Buddha's origins. In a remote village across the border in Nepal, a pillar was discovered. A British expedition was sent out to decipher its inscription.
The script is the early Brahmi script, and the language is a local vernacular language of northern India. And indeed, the inscription itself depicts that this is where the Buddha, the enlightened one, was born.
This was the first piece of evidence to suggest that the Buddha was not just a legendary figure, he actually existed. Ancient Buddhist texts had named the Buddha's birthplace as Lumbini, and now the archaeologists had it located on the map. Now they tried to find the Buddha's childhood home, an ancient city named in the texts as Kapilavastu.
It was apparent that it was located to the west, perhaps between 10 and 15 kilometers to the west of Lumbini, and that's where the search began to intensify.
Expeditions uncovered two possible sites for Kapilavastu, one in India, the other in Nepal. For 100 years, archaeologists have argued over them. New research by Dr. Conningham and his team suggests the ancient city lay at modern-day Tilarakot in Nepal.
It's an extremely exciting site because it is so well preserved. We conducted a series of geophysical surveys